last time we were here, we worked on the header. Now we're going to be working on the nav. So this is what our nav looks like right now. And we want to look like this. Seemingly very easy to do, but you'll see that it takes a few steps to get there. So let's take a look at what we have. And you can see that we have dots over here that don't belong. And these are stacked, and we want them to be side by side, and we want them to be centered on the page. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on. So if I right mouse click and go to inspect, it's going to open up the inspection tool. Let me move this over. That's a big one. Yeah, so let's move this over a little bit. We don't need that much room. And let me get rid of this. There we go. All right, so when you open up the inspection tool, one of the things you want to do is go up here and click and make sure that you have the right side. It by default wants to go along the bottom, and I find that in some cases that works, but for the most part, I want it to be along my right-hand side. In the inspection tool, it shows us all the HTML that we have, and then it shows the styles that apply to those. So let's go ahead and click on the nav, and then here's our HTML. So let's click on the UL. And if we look down here, you can see that list style disk is on here. And we saw that in the code pen. And we don't want it to be disk. We want it to have nothing out here. So that's the first thing we're going to go ahead and change. Let's go ahead and open up Sublime Text, open up our styles, and you can see that we have a nav and that has a background color. We want a more specific selector. So we're going to say that in the parent nav, I have an unordered list. So that's what I'm going to select. And then I'll do the braces. And then we'll use the same thing we use here. You can see list style type, list, and you have list style, list style, list style type. We actually don't have to go all the way down to list style type. I can just use the generic list style, which is different from the notes, and just say none. And that means that none of those will have any type of property to it. And let's do file and then save all. And then let's go back and refresh the page. And you can see now my dots are gone. Excellent. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I need to move these side by side. And why are they the way they are? And you can see that when I click on the LI, you can see that dark goes across the entire page. And that's because a list item, let's see if it has a display of list item. Isn't that interesting? I would expect block, but list item display is actually the same as list item block. So what we want to do is we want to change it from a list item display to an inline block. And then instead of being as big as the entire container, it'll be as big as the content. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, the selector for that is a new one. It is, so underneath the nav UL, I'm going to say nav. So that's the parent. Inside the nav, I have a UL. And inside that UL, I have an LI. And there we go. Now we have to be that specific because you can see we have a list out here too, although that's an ordered list, not an unordered list, so that wouldn't be there. But say we had another unordered list somewhere, we only want to specify the nav part of that. So that's why we want to be specific and say this right here. All right, so we want to change that display. And right now it is list item. And we want it to be inline block. And if we just did inline, we wouldn't be able to force things above and below it. It would have no impact. So we use inline block so it keeps the characteristic of being able to move things up and down above and below it. Let's do file and save all. And let's go back wherever that may be. Here we go. And refresh. And now they're side by side. So the problem is they are too close. And you see there's a little tiny gap between each one. And the reason why that gap is there is that there is a 4-pixel gap between inline block. We've seen that before. And what we want to do is add to that that margin, or actually exceed it. So it doesn't say anywhere in here that there's any margin on that, and that's because it's magic margin. So you won't see it anywhere. Just know that whenever things are inline block, 4 pixels separate each one of those. And we want to go ahead and fix that. So we're going to say that what we want to do is let's put them 15 pixels apart instead of 4 pixels. So I'll do margin and then left, or do a margin right. Let's see, margin left, margin left, and we'll make it 15 pixels. And then we'll do file, save all, and then we'll refresh. And you see now that they're nicely moved aside. But you'll also notice, actually this isn't so, well, I've got a problem here because of my size. Let's see. There we go. All right, so you can see that this is centered with this, but this is not centered with that. It is off to the right. So again, if we go into our UL, as soon as I click on it, you can see the change in color. So look at the left here, and you can see that it's a blue line and they have a greenish blue or aqua at the very end. If we move down here, we can see, because you can't see because I can't get any farther down than that. I really don't want to move that down, but see this margin? So margin, I wish I could, let me move it up. And painted neck. So you can see that that UL has a 40 pixel left padding. And what I want to do is remove that, and that will move this off to the left. So let's go ahead and do that. That's padding. That padding is on the UL. So you can see the UL has been selected. Let's move on down. All right, so that's the UL. And what we want to do is we want to say padding. Now it's the left padding, but there's no other padding except that. So I'm just going to say, hey, remove any padding that's on there, 0. And that will get rid of that left padding. And we do file, save all, and then refresh. You see it's moved back over. So this here used to be right under there. But it still seems like it's off from here. There's only a little space between there and there, but a big space over here. And that's because we have this extra margin off to that left. See that LI has that margin. So we need to go ahead and get rid of that also, and that will also push it off to the left. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we want to do, let's go back to that. I have left margin on each one of these. See that tan to the left of each one. That's that margin that's pushing them across. But home doesn't need to have that left margin. There's nothing to the left of it. So that's why we want to focus on this one right here. Now, what we have is we have a nav, UL, LI, and this is the first child in that list. So we're going to be using that syntax, same syntax we used when we did CodePen that you may or may not remember. So that is going to go, let's do that down here. I have a parent of nav. Inside that nav, I have a UL. Inside that UL, I have an LI. And the selector that we want to use is colon first dash child. And that means the first LI, that's a child inside the UL. All right, and now we can say that we want for that one to be margin. And again, I could say margin left 0, or I can come up here. You can't even see that, so let me move this up. I could do margin left, or I can do margin. There's no other margin on that, so I can do either of those. So let's just do margin. And I'm going to make it 0. Now notice that we use a margin left of 15 pixels. I don't want to ever use pixels for 0 because later on, if we start changing these to EMs or some other um, uh, unit, then this 0 won't work. So whenever you're using 0, you never use the unit along with it. You're just saying that whatever unit we're using, it's going to be 0, and that saves you from all sorts of problems later on. All right, let's do File and Save All. Let's go back and refresh. You can see that it's moved on over now, and now it looks exactly in the center, and that's exactly what we wanted. So, um, and that took us 11 minutes, so that's actually perfect. The next thing we're going to do is start messing with these family member, the stats, and that's going to have a bunch of changes because we want these two to be side by side, and that's going to make it a little bit more difficult for us. All right, that's it, and we're on to the next lesson.